Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks in a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business at paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. A Minnesota man took the lives of his wife, his ex-girlfriend, and 2 children before taking his own life because Donald Trump won the election.
We're learning more about 4 people, including 2 children, who police say were shot and killed yesterday in Duluth. Police discovered their bodies in 2 different homes just a mile apart after doing a welfare check when one of the victims didn't show up for work. Jennifer Hoff's here now with more on who police say the shooter is. Jennifer, this is just an awful case.
It's pretty terrible, Lauren. Police say 46-year-old Anthony Nephew shot and killed his former partner and their teenage son, and also killed his wife and their 7-year-old son, and then himself.
Police vehicles lining Duluth streets yesterday point to the tragedy that took place there. The city's police chief addressing it today.
I wish we were having a conversation under better circumstances.
Chief Mike Sonoa says Anthony Nephew killed his ex-wife, Erin Abramson, and their 15-year-old son inside a home. He's then accused of killing his current wife, their 7-year-old son, and himself at another home a few minutes away. Officers first responding after Abramson didn't show up for work at the Environmental Services Division for the nearby city of Superior.
She dedicated her life and her work to protecting public health in Superior and the North Woods of Wisconsin, and to protecting the health of Lake Superior. She's going to be very dearly missed for her work and her personality.
When asked about a motive, the chief would only say Nephew had a pattern of mental health issues, who's quoted in a local newspaper just 3 years ago, calling for better mental health care after Nephew said he had a breakdown, calling that the best end result, when it can also lead to homicide and suicide.
Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family, friends, and loved ones of the 4 victims in this tragic incident, as this is a senseless and tragic event.
And this tragedy happening just a little over 2 years after what was called Duluth's worst killing in 30 years, when a man killed his aunt, uncle, and their 2 kids before taking his own life. Records show neither him or Nephew in this case had a criminal history, but clearly they were struggling. So if you know somebody who needs any kind of help, we have posted several resources at care11.com. Lauren?
Jennifer, thank you.
Now, according to reports, 46-year-old Anthony Nephew went on a murder spree and took the lives of all of the members of the 2 families that he had established. And as he went to the home of his baby mama, 47-year-old Erin Abramson, he wound up shooting her and taking her life and taking the life of his 15-year-old son, Jacob Nephew, then went to the home of his current wife. And as he went to the home of his current wife, Catherine Nephew, he wound up murdering her and his 7-year-old son, Oliver, and then wound up taking his own life. Now, the police didn't know that Anthony Nephew had participated in this murder spree until they went to do a wellness check on Erin Abramson. And after they did the wellness check, they found that both members of these families had wound up being murdered by Anthony Nephew, and were murdered as a result of what many believe to be mental health issues that Anthony Nephew was having. Now, the Duluth police are seeing this tragic incident where this entire family wound up losing their lives as an isolated incident. But when I take a critical examination of the alleged behavior that Anthony Nephew participated in, it definitely fits the pattern and profile for beta male behavior that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And it's clear to me from reading Anthony Nephew's backstory that he definitely was a man in crisis for an extended period of time, and he might possibly have had mental health issues for an extended period of time that would have required him to be placed inside of an insane asylum. Unfortunately, due to the weak mental health laws that we have on the books, this man basically was allowed to continue being in his community, being a ticking time bomb that sadly wound up exploding as a result of the 2024 election results that this man just disagreed with. Now, when it comes to beta males like Anthony Nephew, many of these beta males like to live in what Dr. Robert Glover in his No More Mr. Nice Guy book calls a smooth world. And in that world, these males like to have a world with no problems, conflicts, or obstacles to their perception of reality. And what these men like to do is basically live in a world where they don't have to deal with anything that they don't agree with. And when it came to Anthony Nephew, he basically had serious issues as related to religious extremism, and he also had issues as related to the politics of the Republican Party, saying that they made it difficult for women to escape abusive situations, and often talked about books like The Handmaid's Tale, which talked about a dystopian society where women were stripped of their rights and forced into servitude. And this basically laid a foundation, along with his issues with former President Donald Trump, who has now currently been elected to become the next president of the United States. This was where the foundation for his frustration lied, in that the world was not going the way that he wanted it to go as related to the whole political situation here in America, as he thought related to women's rights. And I believe that that was basically exacerbated by this man possibly sitting there watching a lot of television, like left-leaning networks like CNN and MSNBC, which presented a lot of polarized content where people were talking about how women were going to lose their rights as a result of the whole campaign as related to the 2024 election of Kamala Harris running against Donald Trump, and was also, again, extremely upset about the whole prospect of Donald Trump running for president. And basically this is the thing that disrupted this man's smooth world. And as it disrupted his smooth world, this is where I believe Anthony Nephew started to simmer and boil in anger. And this further exacerbated his possible mental health issues, because according to police, they had said that they had multiple calls to basically deal with Anthony Nephew over time. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence there to show that this man was a threat to himself and others, and as a result, he could not be detained in a mental health facility. And sadly, this man sat there as a clear and present danger, sitting there as a clear and present danger as this 2024 election was going on. And as this 2024 election was going on, he was becoming more and more visibly upset about all of the information he was getting on these left-leaning networks, possibly like CNN and MSNBC, not to mention further exacerbating the situation. He possibly was going on social media, and as he was going on social media, he was entering into online echo chambers regarding left-leaning viewpoints, and that would further reinforce his angry ideas about Donald Trump. And I go in depth on that in my other book, Stop Simping in Cyberspace, because a lot of people online, they basically go online and they enter an echo chamber where they continue to hear the same information over and over again. And this further polarizes an already polarized individual, and it makes them more and more emotional, makes them more and more upset, makes them more and more angry. And sadly, what happened with this man was possibly simmering and boiling in anger, and boiling for an extended period of time as related to his issues as related to women's rights. This possible male feminist possibly was simmering and boiling in anger regarding what he thought was going to be a major change to the world with the election of Donald Trump. And with the election of Donald Trump in the 2024 election, I believe what happened here is that this man wound up exploding in a rage. And as he wound up exploding in this rage, he felt like there was nothing for him to live for or his family to live for. And that possibly could have been the motive for this man to look to murder his entire family and wind up taking his own life. He possibly couldn't cope with the idea of living in a real world where Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States. So since he couldn't cope with living in a world where President Trump would be running the country, he decided to do the only thing he thought was logical and leave this world and take his family with him. That's what this beta male thought he would do. And the great irony of this whole situation is while he sat there and was upset about women's rights and having their rights taken away, he took the rights of his wife and his ex-girlfriend away to live, and the rights of his two sons to be able to live. And the other great irony was that while he talked about how Republicans make it difficult for women to escape abusive situations, he wound up creating a situation where those women could not escape the abuse he had participated in maliciously by taking their lives, and stripped these women of their right to live, ironically being similar to The Handmaid's Tale. That's what happened here with this beta male, who was again frustrated again about having to deal with a real world where Donald Trump would be the president of the United States. He wound up participating in the very same behaviors that he basically said he was against. And that's what happens with a lot of beta males. Whenever they can't deal with the real world, they want to destroy the world around them, and they want to destroy the lives of others around them. And in this case, what this beta male wanted to do is he wanted to make it look like he was protecting his family by taking their lives. But in actuality, what he was participating in was a selfish action where because he couldn't deal with the reality of Donald Trump being the next president of the United States, possibly, he wound up again exploding in this rage and did this again as part of his logic as related to possibly his mental health. And I say possibly due to his mental health because if this guy had mental health issues, again, you would think that if he thought, because he wrote articles about mental health, you would think he would have gone out here and committed himself to a mental institution to avoid being able to harm others. But I don't know if he was really mentally ill. Now, they say he had episodes as related to his mental health, but I don't know. From studying lots of beta males, a lot of these guys, again, they will appear to be mentally ill on the outside, but really what it is that they just are angry that they can't get their way, and they can't deal with a world with real people. They can't deal with a world with real people who have differences of opinion, different viewpoints, different ideas about life. Many of these men have a hard time coping because they were basically coddled by their mothers, and because they were coddled by their mothers, these guys don't know how to deal with conflict. They don't know how to deal with differences of opinion or life not going their way. And some of these guys, when they can't deal with stuff, it looks like they're having mental health issues, but sometimes it isn't. But if this was the case, again, the whole system basically failed this family, because this man was, again, a ticking time bomb that was going to definitely go off. From my years of experience doing research on the man crisis, when you have an individual like this, you just can't call the police on this guy. No, what you have to do is move yourself away from this individual. Move yourself as far away from this individual as you possibly can, because it's not a matter of if he's going to go off, it's a matter of when, and he's a clear and present danger to anyone. And when it comes to guys like this, we definitely do need a return of the mental health facilities in order to place these individuals. I believe we need a return to insane asylums. And if we got a return to insane asylums, I believe we would definitely see a clear correction of this behavior. Either we would see these individuals basically winding up getting the care that they need as related to inpatient care inside of an asylum, or many of these individuals would basically have to cope with reality because they would have to deal with the consequence of being put away and judged to be mentally incompetent. And that would basically help get a lot of these guys to, again, get the help that they need. But the sad part about this is that a person wound up killing his own family all over an election where, again, no one is going to, again, be getting any sort of benefit as related to the whole situation, because the whole thing is with these elections, they basically are just a part of life. And sadly, because we have a group of males and even some females, from what I've seen, they don't know how to cope with life. They don't know how to cope with the whole situation, is that sometimes your candidate loses just like your team loses. I mean, many people just can't cope with this whole thing, and as a result, they're going to participate in this extreme behavior. And some of the most extreme behavior you could wind up participating in is wind up hurting someone, and that's what sadly happened here in the case of Anthony Nephew. He went to extremes because he couldn't deal with a reality of a world where Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States. And sadly, he wound up again taking the life of his family. And sadly, he wound up doing this because this man in crisis could not get the help that he needed, and could not get the help to be to be able to deal with his issues as related to coping with reality, because he couldn't deal with a real world with Donald Trump as president, and he couldn't deal with that world, and many others can't deal with that world, which makes me sometimes ponder, is this a mental health issue, or is this just people being spoiled? Because in the real world, sometimes we just have to accept things that aren't the way that we want them to be. And this guy couldn't accept this, and again wound up participating in this great tragedy, which shows us how much worse the man crisis is getting in this country, because we're seeing an increase not only in frequency of this violence, but this violence being motivated for just some of the most trivial reasons that people used to be able to cope with. I mean, I remember in 1980, when I was a kid, when Ronald Reagan became the president of the United States, I would hear my mother and many other people talk bad about Ronald Reagan, but I would just go out here and deal with it overall. Same thing in 1988 when George Bush was the president, basically coped with that, and the same thing in 2000 when George W. Bush was president, and the same thing when Barack Obama got elected. And the whole thing is, presidents come and go, and you have to deal with the reality of people that you don't want in power to be in power, and understand that there are more important things to your life, like doing God's work on earth, being able to have your freedom to live an abundant life under God, because God is the ultimate one in control. And if he's the ultimate one in control, there's nothing you can do to control things like who the next president is, and the only thing you can do is go on with your life. But sadly, many men and women who have a problem coping with reality don't know how to do this, and that's why we've got this crisis going on as related to people's mental health. They've got this crisis going on as related to people's mental health because many of these people can't cope with the real world. They can't cope with a real world with real people who have real differences of opinion. And the whole thing is, if you can't cope with that kind of life, we have a real bad problem, because if you can't cope with a life where you have to deal with real people, then you're going to have a lot of people whose minds are going to fall completely apart, because that's not how life works. I mean, you're going to have to deal with things that you don't agree with, things that you don't like. But sadly, we've got a lot of people who were raised in the world of dysfunction. And sadly, that's why this man crisis is going to get worse before it gets better. And I'm just really sad to see this family wind up losing his life, all because we had to deal with another man in crisis. Now, if you want to learn how to identify the behavior of beta males and be able to identify that behavior so you can avoid being in a tragedy like this, or wind up having to deal with a tragedy like this in your life, or be able to put some distance between yourself and a person who is toxic like this, or get them some help, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos talking about the man crisis in this country, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.